Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today, I'm joined by Nikita Kaufmann, an expert with 12 years of experience in hotel CRM, data analysis, and loyalty, with names such as Fairmont Hotels, small luxury hotels of the world, Millennium Hotels, CPR Vision, an agency that specializes in CRM. Thank you for joining us for this chat, Nikita.
Thank you for having me, Sunit. It's a pleasure to be here.
I wanted to just learn from you today about how hotels facing a COVID-induced demand crisis rely on guests that they know so intimately to bring back some of that demand. So, without further ado, let me just dive into straight into the questions. So, CRM solutions have been around forever, right? They've been around for a very long time. Why do you think hotels have been so slow to adopt them and to utilize them to bring back um, their most loyal guests?
Yeah, that's a good question, Sunit. And to understand this, we actually need to go back into the 3 points to this, and one is the history of the development of the CRM in itself as technology, as well as hotels and how they have used technology in the past. And when you map these two, you'll see whether they're lagging or not. The other one, the second point, is the nature of the product, how what kind of product we have as against other industries who are better at using CRM, and well as and the third point is lack of knowledge and understanding of how to leverage the CRM. So, going to my first point, where we map the history of how the CRM was developed, if you see, this product has been around for the last 4 decades. And not much was done in the first 2 decades in terms of, especially with hospitality in mind. And CRM itself actually, there were massive changes and disruption in the CRM industry only towards the end of the 90s. Beginning of this century, with the dot-com bubble, the CRM industry retracted heavily. And therefore, that's not been very long from where we are today. Now, if you look at the hotel industry and how they have leveraged technology, and it doesn't have to necessarily be CRM, but if you see how they have leveraged technology, hotels have always been leveraging technology. If you go back in history, depending on social changes and whatever has been the newest expectation in the market, hotels have always been very innovative, and they have leveraged technology. However, with there has been a rapid development of technology, especially hospitality specific technology, in the last 10 years. And I think this also has to do with mobile and the smartphone launches with iPhone in 2007 and things like that around that age. So when it comes to, so that's the first point of, if you map the history of CRM and if you map the history of hotel technology, you see that the hotels are not severely behind or lagging behind um, adopting to technology. The other thing is, when it comes to CRM, and when it comes to adopting CRM for the benefit of hotels and hotel brands, I think it's also the nature of the product. That's the second point I made, which is the product being so experiential in nature, and it's so. I think there is such a people's industry. I think the industry has best thought it's best to use people to service people in that sense. And that brings me to the third point, which is, therefore there has been a lack of knowledge and understanding of how you can best leverage CRM. So yes, that it is a very experiential kind of business, and it is important to have that human interaction, but how can you make that interaction better? How can you personalize it more? Which means you are now using the CRM to cater to your external audience in terms of whether it's sales or marketing or customer service, but you're also using the CRM for your internal audience or internal clients, you can say, which is your employees, and they are empowered with the knowledge of your guests to deliver better service. So I think if you put all these three together, you will see that the industry is not severely lagging behind, but there is a lack of how this technology can be better used.
All right. So one of the key points that you made that was very interesting was about empowering hotels and empowering the hotel employees to do things. A lot of the independent and boutique hotels that we speak with that are competing on so many different fronts, whether it is, um, competing with larger brands with massive budgets or OTAs to attract their customers. When you work with such boutique hotels in the past, how would you guide them along empowering their employees, or how would you create a framework that they can use to bring that demand of loyal customers back to their hotels?
Yeah, so essentially you're asking me two questions in this. One is how smaller boutique hotels can bring back repeat business, and the other one is how they can empower their employees to use this information. Yeah. So to answer your first question is, see, for the larger chains, for the larger hotel chains, they have, or they also have a large presence and geographically. So bringing in repeat business doesn't matter. A guest could be staying in New York and he could use the same brand to stay in Singapore or in Japan, and we call that repeat business, right? Whereas for independent hotels or for smaller boutique hotels, they are in a way locationally challenged, I would say, because there's only those many hotels that the guest, or there could be just one hotel that the guest needs to come back to, and that's where repeat business starts getting more difficult. But I think the smaller chains are also at an advantage of having data that is easy to manage, right? So since you're a smaller hotel, you have more personal interaction. There's more richer data that you can gather of your guests. It's not like a big hotel and where things are mainly all done, um, in a way at superficially at a top level. So you have this an advantage of managing this data. Now, assuming that these small boutique hotels have clean and good quality data, which is really important in terms of the CRM business to begin with, I think it's very important to know who your top customers are. So something that um, I I always recommend, or I always say, that it's important to know your guests or your consumers from a multi-dimensional aspect. And what I mean by that is, you must have heard of the RFM analysis, that is recency frequency monitoring, and I'll come to what that means. I'll briefly explain what that means. But that looks at your guests uh, from a multifaceted view of your guests. So you're not just looking at the volume of transactions, or you're not just looking at how much they have spent. So basically, it means recency means how many times has the guest, what's the time interval between the purchases that your guest has made, or the transactions your guest has made. And then you have frequencies, how often do they purchase. And then monetary spend is how much um, money or they are spending at your hotel. So
The
when you
dollar value,
combine
really.
the dollar value, so when you combine this, it gives you an overall view of your guest, of each of your guests. You can even go down to, I mean, the CRM is amazing. You can also go in and actually score each of your guests. And then from all of your guests, once you have this score, or you have this analysis done, you actually can go in and see who are your top 20% guests. And the classic Pareto principle: 20% of your
Absolutely.
guests, yeah, are going to bring in 80% of your business. And that still applies. If you go in and you see, once you apply the RFM analysis and you go and study these 20% guests, these are the guests you need to start focusing heavily focusing on, even the top 10%, even more. And what can you do to personalize things? Small boutique hotels are at an advantage to personalize things even more, make changes faster. They don't have big rewards programs, complex systems. They can just make these changes very quickly. So this is what would be something that I would recommend in terms of getting starting with with your database, with understanding your consumers. Um, does that answer your question?
Absolutely. So if I understand this correctly, if I'm a small hotel, what I'm really looking at doing is understanding that I am a nimble hotel and leverage that strength. What I need to drive that repeat demand is first to take a database that I already have, make sure that I clean it up, and then identify who the most important guests for me are, not just at the level of saying these are my top 10% guests, but also to go into the level of saying what are their preferences, what are some of the things that they would find rewarding, and
That's right.
then to create rewards that they would want to actually enjoy.
That's right. So you don't just look at a guest and say, oh, he has booked a room, which is, I don't know, take an example, $2,000 a night. So he's a big, yes, for that particular stay, he is a big guest, but you can't ignore other guests who may not be spending so much in any one stay, but they may have stayed with you and been loyal to you for many, many years. And you cannot ignore those guests. And then, like you said, their preferences, how do you personalize their stay? How do you enhance their stay is by adding in more preferences and you can do that much better at a smaller level hotel or a smaller boutique hotel than you would do at a large hotel. I don't know, 500-room hotel where things are pretty much very fast moving.
Yeah, that would give a lot of our audience a lot of assurance. All right, Nikita. So the other aspect that you spoke about earlier was really about that employee empowerment. Tell me a little bit more about how hotels can help their employees feel empowered and deliver on that personalized experience for these high value guests that they have identified.
So, the CRM is great in terms of obviously providing this information and a lot of information, so long as good quality information is added into the system. When it comes to using the system, we talk of customer engagement externally, and what I was speaking earlier was of, of engaging your internal client, so your employees. So if you empower and train your employees to use the CRM correctly, every employee can actually have a 360-degree view of your guest. And imagine an experience when a guest checks in and he is, let's say, allergic to, I don't know, strawberries, and then he moves on and there is, let's say, a champagne and strawberry turn down, for example, and your housekeeping team or your room service team, whoever is doing the turn down at that point, actually omits the strawberries from there. And then when the guest goes for dinner at one of your restaurants, you make sure that anything strawberry or related to that is not, So I'm going into a very, very niche and, example that I'm giving you. But basically what I'm trying to get at is that your employees, if they have a 360-degree view of your guest, this can be used across the board to make the guest stay and his experience at your hotel more pleasant, more comfortable. He's going to be assured that he's very well taken care of.
So from the sounds of it, it seems like the the hotels really need to first put information in the hands of all of their employees, not just a CRM manager or a marketing person, but really down to the housekeeping staff. And then,
Definitely.
secondly, what I understood from the answer is that we need to help these employees understand some of these linkages between the information that is being presented to them and how they should change the way they service the room or they service the guest on the fly.
That's right. So it's very important that they're not only empowered with this um, access to this information, but it's also important that they have very good training in understanding and interpreting this information. And you also want to make sure you bring to them, if you have a good CRM system with you should be able to just have department specific information, so that you don't need to, not all information will be useful, and too much of information is just going to be an overload. So you can actually split that down. A good CRM system should be able to give you all this information just how you need it.
Right. So with that now said, we've kind of the hotels have now understood in this framework how to identify their top guest, how to create um, these internal recognitions of their top employees or top guests, followed by training their employees to access the information that they have about these guests, and then to customize the service that they provide to these guests. I think the most burning question that's on everyone's mind is that now that we have some green shoots of recovery being shown by SDR data in China, particularly, um, there are all these indications that domestic demand is going to come back first. How should a hotel, like, what would be your practical tips for hotel marketers to look at their data and to apply the framework that we just spoke about a couple of minutes ago?
So looking at the STR data, it's good to know. I think there's 87% of hotels in China are now open, and the occupancy rates have risen. They were between 7 and 10% earlier, and they've risen to about 35%. So it's all good news for the industry. And I think that China is normalizing and domestic travel, and gradually this will increase. I think my approach would be that more than marketing, I think I'm hoping that hotel brands have already built loyalty and engaged and with their customers, and strengthened relationship during this time of crisis. So if they've done this, I think the post-19 COVID-19 situation will be, to me, I think people are fatigued with the lockdown, by the insecurity of for their health and for their safety. So I think it's very important that hotels engage with their consumers or their guests in a very relaxed, in and reassuring, optimistic way. I think it's not a time when it's about in the face marketing at this point. I think also marketers need to be more sensitive, a little more sensitive to their marketing approach. And once they can engage with their Chinese audience, and they can say that that their brand is at the forefront, that they genuinely care about their audience, I think they can then use their different platforms to reach out to these consumers in a sense where we say, is the message can be about what is it that the hotels are doing in terms of your safety, in terms of your health. What is it that there's a lot of flexibility needed. For example, Chinese consumers will go for discount rates, but if your rates or your booking, uh, sorry, if you don't have a cancellation policy, and fully refundable cancellation policy, I think your consumers are going to be put off by that. So I think marketers need to look at that, work with the hotels. There's a lot of other, safety, well-being, mental well-being, all these aspects that hotels hopefully have put in place. Also a lot of AI, because people will want to distance themselves from each other. So are the marketers really bringing all these aspects and engaging their consumers with that kind of information? So I would suggest that that would be my recommendation in terms of how marketers could engage with the Chinese consumer.
So, sensitivity and extreme empathy. And lastly, assurance to the consumers that their hotels are ready to take the demand back into their hotels are really the keywords. That's what we need to focus on. Um, and with that, I think thank you so much for your time, Nikita, with us today. And we learned a whole lot on how hotels can start thinking about building a framework to start bringing some of this local domestic demand back to their hotels, where we can go back to the new normal.
Thank you for
Thank you so
having me,
much.
Sunny. Nice talking to you.